Part 16. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 151. Shiji is very fast. After all, he is a flying pirate. As long as he doesn't encounter any storms, no one is faster than him on this sea. Orgrim is willing to call him the fastest. While Orgrim and others were chatting, a huge ship faintly appeared on the sea high in the sky. The ship looked a bit like a whale in the deep sea. This is Newgate's Moby Dick. Speaking of which, people like Shiji, Kaido, and Charlotte Lingling all like to stay on their own island when they have nothing to do. Only Newgate, no matter what happens, will stay in his own sea area, but he will hardly land on any islands. Being on the boat seemed to give him a sense of security. Orgrim was standing in front of the railing on the deck, looking at the giant ship on the sea in the distance, and whispered softly, Moby Dick, Newgate's flagship." Beckman smiled and said, "Is it a coincidence? Our old profession is whaling." Orgrim was stunned when he heard this, and then laughed and said, "Gee, ha 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 ha, you are right, I am a master of whaling." Orgrim and the others discovered Newgate's flagship, and Newgate and others naturally saw Shiji's iconic ship. At this time, on the deck of the Moby Dick, Newgate's huge figure, he was sitting on his big sofa, with his iconic broadsword, Kong Yunkai, on the side of the sofa. Newgate was holding a wine bowl in his hand, looking at Shiji's ship in the sky. He was also a little surprised. Anyway, he didn't expect Shiji to come here. What the hell is that lion doing? Newgate frowned a little and said to himself. He observed for a while and found that Shiji's ship quickly stopped there and didn't move. He also confirmed that it seemed that this bastard was targeting him. Come. But I didn't see his large fleet. Maybe it's not here to start a war? Although I don't know what Shiji's purpose is, but being looked at in such a condescending manner, Newgate is also very unhappy. I saw Newgate, he threw his wine bowl on the ground and shouted at Shiji's flagship, "Shiji, if you continue to look down on me like this, I will sink you to the bottom of the sea." His voice was not loud, but it was very penetrating. From such a long distance, Orgrim could hear these words clearly. At the same time, Shiki's unruly figure, he also walked out of the cabin. Although he couldn't see Newgate's ship from his position, he still laughed and responded to Newgate's words. "Gee, ha 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 ha, are you still so irritable?" Newgate, Shiki laughed. However, he did not provoke Newgate, but waved his hand. Soon, Shiji's big ship landed on the sea. This time, he really saw Newgate sitting on the deck. "You're in a good mood. Are you drinking?" Shiji walked to the bow of the ship, looked at Newgate and said with a smile. All the members of the Whitebeard pirates were also looking at Shiji at this time, but they didn't look so wary. The boss is the boss after all. Although Shiji is strong, their father is not weak either, okay. A smile appeared on Newgate's lips, and then he said, "What? Do you want to come up and have a drink with me after a long time?" Ji smiled, with a nostalgic smile on his lips, and asked, "When was the last time we had a drink? I can't remember something clearly." "Who knows? I don't remember it either. It must have been 5 or 6 years ago, right?" Newgate thought about it for a while, then smiled and shook his head and said. Speaking of which, Shiji had a good relationship with Newgate. When he was working under rocks, Shiji was the only one he liked and thought he could work with him. The only person he was equal to was Newgate. As for Kaido and others, they were all Shiji's brothers at that time. It was good to have a good relationship, but the two were separated now, so they still had to fight. "You came all the way here to catch up with me, right?" "Shiki," Newgate tilted his neck slightly and asked a little arrogantly. "Gee, ha 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 ha," Shiji laughed first, and then asked, "I heard that you were robbed by Roger not long ago." Newgate frowned, regarding the rumors on the sea that he was dating Roger. Newgate certainly knew that the thieves suffered some small losses during the battle. But based on his judgment, it was impossible for him to end up explaining something to those people who were chewing their mouths, and he didn't bother to explain. If you think I'm easy to bully, feel free to come and take a look. But Newgate was still a little annoyed when Shiji said that to him in person. Of course, he still didn't explain anything, but asked back, is the climate in Edwall okay? Nothing. No doubt, he was directly mocking Shiji. Shiji's expression changed slightly, looking a little gloomy, and then he said, would you like to go and see for yourself? Ku la 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 la, it seems you are not here to drink with me this time, Shiji. Newgate laughed and said. Shiki's originally gloomy expression suddenly disappeared, as if nothing happened just now. Then, he also said with a smile, if you want to drink, you have plenty of time. Newgate, do you want it? After a long time, let's talk. Newgate's eyes swept around Shiji, then stopped on Orgrim, and asked curiously, is that guy your disciple? A confident smile appeared on the corner of Orgrim's lips. When facing Newgate, he didn't feel timid at all. Newgate even saw some excitement in his eyes. That was a feeling that Newgate was very familiar with. Every time someone wanted to challenge him, it was with this look. Confident young boy, Newgate commented very casually. He really felt that Orgrim was very good, otherwise he would not have been favored by Shiji and become his disciple. But if you want to challenge Whitebeard, it's still far away. It's about the same as Shiji. Gee ha 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 ha, yes. Shiji laughed. Newgate averted his gaze, then looked at Shiji and asked, what are you communicating about? Now that Shiji has come all the way and provoked himself again, Newgate will certainly not refuse this kind of provocation and communication. For the two of us, there is no need to fight this time. Anyway, I can't kill you, and you can't beat me, right? Shiji twitched the corner of his mouth and said with a smile. Although Newgate was very confident, he really had to admit that Shiji's words made sense. If the two of them fought, the sky would really split, the sea would turn, and there would be separation. There is no outcome. I don't know how many times the two of them have fought before, and there is no outcome. So what? Newgate raised his chin and asked arrogantly. Shiji didn't care about Newgate's arrogance, because that guy was qualified to be arrogant. My disciple, your son, wouldn't it be appropriate to compete? Shiji grinned, showing an evil smile, and said softly. An inexplicable look flashed in Newgate's eyes, and then he looked at Orgrim, and then said, it seems that you are interested in your are the disciples very confident? Shiji laughed and said, gee ha 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 ha, don't you dare. As soon as he finished speaking, Marco quickly said, Dad, let me teach that guy a lesson, right? A smile of relief appeared on the corner of Newgate's lips. That bastard Shiki was very confident in his disciples, so how could Newgate not have confidence in his own son? But before Newgate could speak, however, Orgrim moved, walked to Shiji, and said softly, Boss Shiji, before that, let me challenge Newgate. Shiji glanced at Orgrim in surprise, but then he laughed again. It is normal for Orgrim to want to challenge Newgate. It would be strange to say that Orgrim did not have such an idea at this time. Shiki, like Newgate, is often challenged by others, such as Mihawk at the time. So of course he understands Orgrim's mentality. On the other side, Newgate also heard Orgrim's words and couldn't help laughing. Ku la 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 la, he is really an energetic young man. Newgate laughed. Gee ha 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 ha, do you want to give him a chance? Whitebeard. Shiji asked with a smile. Humph, I'll give you the golden lion some face, Newgate snorted and said arrogantly. Dad, Marco was a little angry and wanted to stop something. But Newgate waved his hands and said, it's nothing. Orgrim also became excited at this time, laughed and said thank you. Then Orgrim stretched out his hand and said, here comes the hammer. As soon as he finished speaking, Hank held the sledgehammer in both hands. Walked to Orgrim's side, and respectfully placed the doom hammer in Orgrim's hand. Newgate was also shocked when he saw this scene. Damn it, are all young people nowadays so good at showing off? I have traveled all over the world for so many years, but I have never seen anyone carry a knife for me. Thinking of this, Newgate turned his head and looked at Josie standing next to him. Let Josie do it next time. Just when Newgate was thinking about all this, Orgrim put the warhammer on his shoulders, stepped on the fence with one leg, and said with an evil smile on his lips, "I'm sorry." "Humph, come here," Newgate snorted softly, without even the intention of getting up. He didn't seem to take Orgrim seriously at all. Orgrim didn't care so much, because Newgate just had this kind of thing. What a qualification! He exerted force with his feet and rushed out of Shiji's boat. A shock wave exploded in the air. The figure rushed towards Newgate's boat at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, he also pulled out a wave in his hand. Hwaying, the doom hammer spun in Orgrim's hand like a propeller. In a moment, a transparent energy halo condensed on the rotating hammer head. Looking at this scene, Newgate's expression changed slightly. As soon as an expert takes action, he will know if there is any. Today's flowers are presented to me, I can still bear the big guys and continue to ravage me. Don't pity me. I looked at the monthly ticket, it's more than 500. I feel that there are still 10 days in this month, it shouldn't be more than 1000. Think about it. Let's continue to call for everyone's monthly votes. When the monthly votes exceed 700, I will continue to add updates. Big guys, give me some strength, use these things to kill me. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 152. Newgate's ability as the shock fruit, relying on this ability to travel all over the world, naturally developed this ability to the extreme. Because of this, he can certainly understand what the transparent energy circle surrounding Orgrim's warhammer is. Just like him, it is a manifestation of compressing the ability to a certain level. Impact fruit, Newgate murmured in his heart. At the same time, Newgate's original contempt for Orgrim was instantly restrained. He stood up without hesitation and took the broadsword was pulled out from his side, and in an instant, the same transparent energy wave appeared on the tip of Kongyunki's knife. Newgate danced with the broadsword in his hand, drawing a circle in the void, and then faced Orgrim's figure was slashed out with a single blow. "Drink," Orgrim roared angrily, and hammered the tip of Newgate's knife. In an instant, the two people's transparent halos collided together, and then, it seemed that everyone heard an explosion. Next, in 1 second, an extremely powerful impact erupted from the place where the two met, setting off several unparalleled shock waves directly in the air and spreading out. Then, the whole world shook, and the originally calm sea was torn apart in an instant. With the two ships as the center, huge waves began to roll, and then turned into tsunamis and escaped. The air also began to vibrate. Under the energy of the impact, the space suddenly shattered, revealing a dark hole. Subsequently, continuous repairs were made, and the powerful energy was released. Shiji and many of the young men on Newgate's ship were unable to stand steadily. Only the cotters could look directly at the turbulent scene in front of them. Newgate only felt a huge force at this time. Came from the big knife in his hand, and the deck under his feet also cracked and formed some lines, but his figure was still as steady as a mountain, motionless. There was even a smile on the corner of his mouth, which felt calm and unhurried. And at this moment, Orgrim felt the concussive power in his hand coming one after another, continuously, and his arms were numb from the shock, and his internal organs were constantly surging. How could I not even be able to catch a knife? Orgrim felt fierce in his heart, and the power in his hand exploded again. The powerful impact was released from his body, overturning Newgate's concussive power. The next moment, Newgate's sword and Ogrim's warhammer suddenly crossed over, and Orgrim's figure also fell from the sky. With a backhand grab, the warhammer swung again and hit Newgate's head. Newgate's mouth was filled with confidence. With a smile, Before Orgrim's figure could fall, the void was punched out. The next moment, the space shattered, and an even more powerful tsunami swept out. Orgrim only felt that the space where he was being destroyed. Being squeezed and shattered, the originally fallen figure was frozen in the air. Shocks were felt from all directions, causing a stream of blood to involuntarily overflow from the corner of his mouth. "Drink," Orgrim roared angrily. A transparent halo flashed around him. Then, his powerful shockwave withstood Newgate's concussive force, and the figure originally frozen by the shock fruit also broke through this power. "Hit it with a hammer." "Good," Newgate gave Orgrim a very indifferent evaluation. His expression remained unchanged. He raised his arm and struck Orgrim's war hammer. In an instant, the two men were armed. The color haki was all covered up. The next second, the pitch-black fist collided with the hard warhammer. The collision of the armed haki tore everything apart instantly, sweeping out a wave again, and black lightning with sparks swayed between the two of them. Exploded around. "Cool la 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 la, very good." Newgate laughed. Orgrim could not speak at this time. He was afraid that as soon as he spoke, he would vent his anger and lose his strength. If Shiji showed more when fighting him, it is elegance and agility. So what Newgate shows at this time is strength and domineering, no matter what kind of attack you have, what kind of power you have. When I punch out, everything will be empty. The forces of impact and shock are constantly intertwined, everything around him is subverting. Only those with strength can watch this battle. Orgrim looked at Newgate in front of him, but he could not go any further at this time, and could not even touch his figure. For a moment, he felt extremely frustrated. At the same time, his eyes also turned red, and a fierce aura exploded out instantly. "Overlord color," Newgate murmured in surprise. This sudden change made Newgate feel surprised. The next second, his domineering aura also burst out. This is an instinctive feeling. It's not that Newgate can't resist Orgrim's overbearing lust or something. The collision of two overbearing and domineering forces instantly pulled down the clouds in the sky, and then tore them apart, as if a hole had opened in the sky. The sea, which was already rough enough, became completely manic, and huge waves spread out to the distant sea one after another. Not good. The Sphinx stood beside Shiji and couldn't help but reach out to resist the shocking power of these two domineering forces. At this moment, she only felt that she was so small and could be lost at any time in these two soul-shaking powers. Neiman's expression also became quite serious, constantly resisting this power. Shiji had a smile on his lips. He had no intention of protecting this kind of thing. He understood that every time he accepted the baptism of Ba Wang's domineering spirit, it was a kind of tempering for his spirit. The more you resist, the stronger your resistance to the Overlord's domineering energy will be in the future. Now is the best time, isn't it? After all, that guy from Newgate would never show off his domineering aura. This is not only the case on Shiji's ship. Whitebeard's foil Bista is also trying his best to resist this overbearing domineering force. Marco was shocked. Is this Orgrim so strong? In the crowd, Blackbeard Marshal D. Teach was also looking at Orgrim's figure, the powerful Overlord's domineering energy constantly impacting his soul, almost making him lose himself and pass out. So strong, Tikai couldn't help but sigh in his heart. At the same time, he looked at Orgrim's shock fruit that could compete with his father's shock fruit, and his heart was filled with fire. If there was such power, Tiki couldn't help but smacked his lips and thought greedily. It was too late to say it, but it was too soon. The change of these people was only a moment. At the same time that the Overlord's domineering energy burst out, the cruel look in Orgrim's eyes became more and more obvious. He suddenly let go of the warhammer, allowing the warhammer to be knocked away by Newgate's concussive power, and hit it on the ground. On the deck next to it. And this time he let go, making his figure completely close to Newgate's body. The roar of the Dragon King, Orgrim roared angrily, raised his fist, and punched Newgate in the chest. Newgate's eyes flashed, and his chest was instantly covered with an armed and domineering power, and then without hesitation taking advantage of his height advantage, he punched Orgrim from top to bottom. The next second, Orgrim punched Newgate in the chest, and his armed domineering energy burst out again. There was a fierce confrontation, and then a force of impact penetrated out, bursting out from Newgate's back, blowing his captain's coat. But just for a moment, the next second, Orgrim felt a concussive force squeezing towards him. Then his whole body seemed to be deformed, and he was directly pressed to the deck by the punch. Then the deck shattered, and Orgrim's figure was directly hit. Newgate fell into the cabin with a punch. This brief but fierce exchange seemed to come to an end at this moment. Newgate looked down at his chest, and there was a slightly bruised one on it. The fist mark, and then he felt a burst of blood trying to rush out of his mouth. This was the feeling of being hurt internally, but it was not serious. Just when the blood was about to come out, Newgate's throat he moved and swallowed the blood again. Just kidding, how could he spit out some blood at this time with his white beard? Humph, a guy with some skills, Newgate snorted coldly. Not long after, a hand stretched out from the big hole on the deck, and then Orgrim's very embarrassed figure climbed out of it. At this time, there was blood at the corner of his mouth, and there was blood in his ears. Blood seemed to be flowing out. The blow just now, when Newgate punched himself, made Orgrim feel overwhelming pressure, as if his whole body was compressed. It felt like his internal organs were shattered. Ahem, Orgrim couldn't help but cough a few times and vomited out 2 mouthfuls of blood, mixed with some internal organs. This is the so-called strongest attack power? Orgrim looked at Newgate and asked. You're not bad either. Newgate raised his chin and said very arrogantly. But he said this sincerely. But it didn't hurt you at all, Orgrim grinned and said with a ferocious smile. He looked at Newgate, who only had a little bruise on his chest. He looked majestic and high-spirited. Naturally, he didn't think much about it. He just thought that the gap between himself and Newgate was too big. Even if he hit him, he would give it to him. No injuries can be taken away. Newgate is a member of his family who understands his own affairs and knows that he was injured just now. Even if the injury is not serious, he is indeed injured. But at this time, it was impossible for him to show it, so he waved his hand and said, if you want to win against me, you are still 100 years early. At the same time as the voice fell, Newgate danced with the big knife in his hand, and the handle pointed directly on Orgrim's body, and then a force directly flew Orgrim out and threw him into Shiji's ship. At the same time, Newgate stomped his feet slightly, and a concussive force spread out. The warhammer that originally fell on his deck was also directly bounced to Shiji's ship. Shiji, it seems that your disciple was seriously injured, do you want to continue? Newgate raised his chin and looked at Shiji and asked. Gee ha 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 ha, I forgot to tell you, my disciple is immortal. Shiki responded with a laugh. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 153. When Shiji finished speaking, Newgate was also stunned for a moment. Immortality. What does this mean? Like Kaido? Then, Orgrim's figure reappeared in everyone's sight, and Orgrim felt that his condition was not particularly good at this time. But at this moment, he couldn't show it. He only saw a smile hanging from the corner of his mouth and said, "You're showing off your ugliness." As the words fell, he quickly used the life return technique, and then the surging healing power in his body began. Surged. In just a few moments, Orgrim's figure seemed to come out of the embarrassing state just now. Then he stretched out his hand and wiped the corners of his mouth, wiping away the blood on it, showing an evil smile and said, "I can fight again at any time now." In fact, Orgrim did not fully recover, and his internal organs were still some injuries. But it doesn't matter, it's not a big problem. The most important thing now is not to show any cowardice. In the eyes of others, Orgrim's condition has indeed returned to normal at an extremely fast speed. As one of the top masters in the sea, how could Newgate not see this? His brows furrowed, and the importance he paid to Orgrim in his heart increased a lot. He is young, has the courage to challenge himself, and has the strength to hurt himself. There is no doubt that this Kazgro Orgrim has become a first-class master on the sea. The next step may be to climb to the top and join Newgate, Shiski, and others. And such a guy actually has strong physical fitness and can heal his injuries in a very short time. It will definitely become another monster on the sea in the future. Shiji, this bastard, really found a treasure. At this moment, Newgate felt a little regretful in his heart. When Orgrim came forward, he didn't pay attention to Orgrim at all. If we could pay attention to it earlier and try to get him on our ship, well, in the future, no, he will also be a general now. Orgrim didn't know Newgate's thoughts. If he knew, he would definitely be ready to change his name. If nothing else, it seems good to take over Whitebeard, so I reluctantly changed the name to Alsace. Then, wouldn't it be nice to join the big Whirlpool Spider Squad and practice the filial sun sword together instead of playing with the hammer? He had already thought of a name, so he called them Filial Sons and Two Heroes. The two swords unite to conquer the world. Even Whitebeard will kill you. Putting his thoughts away, Newgate turned to look at his sons and said, "That Kazgarot Orgrim, very strong. Dad, tell me to go. When it comes to immortality, I am the so-called Phoenix," Marco said without hesitation. Now Kojiki Odin ran away with that bastard Roger. Newgate's men actually don't have the top masters, but there are some first-class masters, such as Marco and Josa, two people. In Newgate's view, he could feel some of Orgrim's strength in the brief confrontation just now. Among his sons, only Marco and Jaws were probably the only ones who could compete with him. As for whether he can beat him or not, Newgate has no idea. Orgrim's attack power is undoubtedly quite powerful. Marco and Jaws are both inferior in this aspect. If they really fight, it may depend on the two of them. Can he defeat Orgrim with his almost invincible recovery and defense power? Just as Newgate was talking to his sons, Shiki was also discussing with Orgrim. "What? How about it?" "Injury," Shiki asked. Newgate was fooled, but Shiki knew Orgrim's physique very well, and his immortality was just a cover. Orgrim smiled and said softly still, "Yes, it wasn't really a serious injury just now. Although the injury was not serious, he recovered roughly, so it was nothing serious." At this time, the sky was about to get dark. Orgrim was still very confident in his own strength. Even if his condition was not good, as soon as it got dark, he felt that he could defeat people like Marco. Even if the sky had just been dark, as for hay, he felt that he and Newgate could fight fiercely for a while without falling behind, right? In fact, the fight between the two just now, although fierce, was short-lived. Orgrim himself also had many abilities that he didn't use. But this time he is not here to fight Newgate. Being able to figure out the strength gap between them is a great gain. So Orgrim understands that he is not Newgate's opponent. Next, I didn't choose to fight with him to the end. After all, I was still too young, but being young also has the advantage of being young, that is, it has unlimited possibilities and future. Seeing Orgrim being so confident, Shiji didn't say more. He is also very confident in Orgrim. "Later, you will show all your abilities and give me a good voice," Shiji said with a smile. "Leave it to me," Orgrim said confidently. "If I really overpower Newgate this time, I will benefit from you." Shiji thought for a while and then said, "What are the benefits?" Orgrim asked curiously. Shiji thought about it and felt that he didn't hide anything from Orgrim. He would give him whatever he wanted. Suddenly, speaking of benefits, it seemed that he had nothing to offer. So after pondering for a while, Shiji said, I promise to do something for you, which is considered a promise. As soon as he finished speaking, a gleam flashed in Orgrim's eyes, and then he grinned and said, what a coincidence, I happen to have something that I need your help with, Boss Shiji. Now I will help you more. If you have enough motivation, you will definitely blow their heads off. Shiji glanced at Orgrim with some confusion, but did not ask anything. He just nodded calmly and said, well, do your best. What kind of help does Orgrim want from Shiji? In fact, now, under Shiji, he is really like the second uncle. Except for Shiji, he can do whatever he wants. Therefore, this favor must be related to the Golden Lions. It has nothing to do with the banner, and what Orgrim wants is the Thunder Fruit on Sky Island. Before that, he had not thought about how to talk to Shiji. After all, the Thunder Fruit can be said to be a considerable benefit. Even Shiji would definitely be moved. If Orgrim really took him to the Sky Island and found the Thunder Fruit, it would be anyone's guess. So this plan has never been implemented, because Orgrim didn't want to make trouble with Shiji because of this kind of thing. Of course, there is a certain possibility that Shiji would not have any differences with Orgrim. But this is only a possibility. Orgrim, under the current good situation, Reem has no reason to bet on Shiji's idea, right? If he captures Whitebeard's sons this time, Orgrim can take Shiski to the Sky Island to find the Thunder Fruit. With Shiji's character and unruly character, whatever he says is just like throwing water, and he will not change his mind just because of a Thunder Fruit. Orgrim still has this confidence in Shiji. Perhaps outsiders may see it come on. Shiji is a bit insidious and cunning, and often talks without saying what he means. But in the eyes of Orgrim and his own people, Shiji is indeed a good boss. Although Newgate thinks that Orgrim was difficult to deal with, but with his pride, of course it was impossible to admit defeat directly, and Marco and the others were not weak, right? After confirming the candidates, Newgate said, you can't just fight on the ship, right? If you want to fight, I'll fight on your ship. I don't want to waste money repairing the ship. As he said that, Newgate also looked at the shattered deck beneath his feet, feeling a little unhappy. Speaking of which, Newgate is the top pirate on the sea. But this guy is quite weird. As a pirate, he actually has a part-time job as a philanthropist, secretly giving money to those who were banned from joining the world government because they couldn't pay the heavenly gold, and thus fell into the ruins of the country. Local donation. I really don't know what to say about this guy. He dares to massacre a city and destroy a country, and he also makes charitable donations. Is it justice or evil? Maybe there is no real measurement standard in this world. All in all, Newgate was quite poor. He went out to drink in pubs and took advantage of Marco and the others. He was the strongest man and made himself very embarrassed. But this may also be part of his charm. After hearing Newgate's words, Shiji smiled and said, since it was me who proposed the exchange, I was naturally prepared. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved in the void, and then everyone saw a black spot appearing in the sky, which continued to descend from the clouds. Gradually turned into a medium-sized island, and then plunged into the sea. That's awesome. You bring your own arena when you come out to cause trouble. Beckman looked at the scene and couldn't help complaining. Ni Man and others around him also laughed when they heard this. Shiji glared at them fiercely and said, what do you know? This is called preparing for a rainy day. Newgate also laughed at this time and said, as expected of you, you make a decision and then act. Is the venue even ready? Newgate didn't doubt whether Shiji would do something about it. Because it would be too disgraceful. Neither he nor Shiji were people who could afford to lose. They could lose openly, but in this kind of situation, in fact, if you do any despicable tricks, it would be even more embarrassing than losing if you are discovered. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 154. On Sky's Island, Newgate's Moby Dick docked alongside Sky's flagship. The two of them were sitting together under a big tree on the coast. There was a blanket on the ground, drinks, and barbecue, and they looked like they were having a happy party. On the other side, Marco and Orgrim looked at each other, looking ready to take action at any time. Newgate picked up the wine bowl, took a sip and said, "You bastard, what are your plans?" Shiji also took a sip of wine, smacked his lips and said, "I've been fighting for so long, so I'm just here to overpower you." "Humph, I'm not so kind," Newgate muttered. Then he said with some jealousy, "Give me Orgrim." "Dream." Shiji refused without hesitation. "Cool la 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 la, it seems you really regard him as your heir," Newgate laughed. In Newgate's impression, Shiki was not a person who regarded his subordinates as very important, but this time, it seemed to be different. Shiki looked at Orgrim. Then he said softly, "That guy is different." "Yeah?" Newgate also murmured. Soon, he smiled again and asked, "What's the matter with your rooster-like appearance? Dress up." Shiji rolled his eyes impatiently and said, "It's just bad luck caused by Adwal." "Cool la 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 la, it's a pity that I didn't see the scene with my own eyes." Newgate laughed. Shiji smacked his lips in displeasure, took another sip of wine, and asked, "What about you, did he really lose to Roger?" "Humph, who do you think I am? Will lose to Roger?" Newgate snorted arrogantly. However, he didn't explain anything. He just said, "I just didn't restrict my family's freedom." Maybe Shiji didn't really delve into anything. "Here we go," Newgate whispered softly. Shiji also looked at Orgrim and said with a smile, "You will definitely lose." "Don't underestimate me," Newgate muttered unhappily. At the same time, on the other side, Orgrim was holding a war hammer on his shoulder, touching his chin with one hand, and stared at Marco for a long time. Marco's brows frowned slightly. And then asked, "What's wrong? Any questions?" "Ah," Orgrim exhaled softly, then quickly waved his hand and said, "Nothing, I'm sorry, I just want to take the liberty to ask you about your hairstyle, where is it made?" "I cut it myself, is there any problem?" Marco replied somewhat strangely. No, I just think it's very handsome and elegant, and I want to inquire about it. If I have the chance, I might as well get my hair done." "Since you cut it yourself, forget it," Orgrim said with a smile. I have to say that Marco's taste, at least in terms of hairstyle, it's really bad, making myself look like a big pineapple. Maybe after I defeat you, I'll be in a good mood and give you a haircut. Speaking of which, my dream before I went to sea was to become a great barber," Marco suddenly smiled and said. His hairstyle was often ridiculed by the guys on the ship. At this time, Orgrim actually thought his hairstyle was very handsome, which made Marco admire Orgrim a little. "Yes, he has good taste." "Yeah? That's really a pity. The world has lost a great barber. Speaking of which, before I went to sea to become a pirate, I wanted to be a master whaler," Orgrim said again. Then, the two actually started chatting, as if they had met each other late. The people around who were gearing up to watch a big battle were confused. "What are you two doing? Can you be more serious?" After the two chatted for a while, they realized what was happening and then smiled awkwardly at each other. "Although we seem to get along very well, I won't be merciful if we start to fight later," Orgrim said with a very serious expression. "Don't worry, I won't show mercy." Marco's eyes also condensed a little. Then, both of them fell silent. At the same time, their momentum gradually began to rise. Just when the momentum of both of them climbed to a certain level, suddenly, they moved together. Orgrim exerted force under his feet, and his figure suddenly disappeared from the place, and appeared in front of Marco. Marco's hand brought out a touch of blue flame, and he grabbed it directly toward Orgrim's throat. "Sledgehammer 80, Orgrim shouted in a low voice. As the saying goes, 1 inch long, 1 inch strong. He has a warhammer in his hand. His attack distance is naturally farther than Marco's, and his speed is also faster. Before Marco's arm can catch him, at that time, Orgrim's warhammer had already shined on Marco's head, and he instinctively hit it with the hammer. The pineapple-like head exploded instantly, but there was no blood flowing, but countless green splatters. Blue sparks. The headless Marco figure did not stop moving, and still grabbed Orgrim's throat. Can you move without a brain? As expected of a phantom beast, Orgrim thought in his heart. The movement in his hand was not slow either. The warhammer formed a flower shadow in his hand and moved across his chest, directly blocking Marco's palm. At this moment, the blue flames on Marco's body suddenly surged, and the dazzling fire forced Orgrim to close his eyes. This was an instinctive action. In just one move, Orgrim forced his eyes open, and then he saw an attack like an eagle's claws, grabbing directly at his chest. "Phoenix seal," Marco shouted. However, just when Marco was about to break open Orgrim's chest with his claws, a powerful impact suddenly burst out from Orgrim's body. This impact seemed to come from all directions. Swept out. Marco's figure was directly thrown away by the impact. At the same time, he seemed to hear Orgrim's voice. "Shinra Tianzhang," Orgrim shouted with a perfect score of 2 out of 10. Even though his Shinra Tensei seems very rough, it is not as domineering as Pain from the Hokage next door. But it works, it has a strong impact, enough to lift everything away from him to a certain extent. The moment Marco was thrown away, Orgrim's finger also pointed at Marco's figure. "Flying finger gun condensation wave," Orgrim shouted in a low voice. Just as Marco flapped his wings twice and stabilized his body, he felt something coming through the air, but he didn't realize what it was. What? His chest exploded, a big hole appeared directly in his chest, and the blazing blue flames continued to burn. "It hurts," Marco said with a smile on his face. "Stop lying," Orgrim also said with a smile on his lips. As he finished speaking, Marco raised his arms and flew directly from the ground to the sky. Then he suddenly flapped his 2 arms that turned into wings, and 2 slashes flew out from his arms, pointing directly at Orgrim on the ground. Orgrim casually swung the sledgehammer in his hand, sending a slashing blow away. He exerted force under his feet, and a shockwave exploded. His figure shot straight into the sky. At the same time, he activated his moon step and started running in the air. Marco, on the other hand, had no intention of fighting with Orgrim. He flapped his wings and drew a blue trajectory in the air, constantly keeping distance from Orgrim, and at the same time throwing out some Qingyan slashing attack is like the Lanjiao in the 6 styles. Orgrim failed to hit Marco several times, and he was also calculating something in his mind. At the moment when Marco was hovering, the warhammer in his hand flew away directly, and accelerated by the shock wave, it flew at an extremely fast speed. Speed hit Marco. Marco was also very fast. He couldn't dodge at this time, and he was not afraid at all. He let the warhammer hit him directly, smashing his lower body to pieces, and countless blue flames erupted. The Phoenix's ability is so abnormal, no matter what kind of injury it suffers, it can gradually recover in the blue flames and remain intact. However, before Marco could feel proud, Orgrim's figure quickly approached in the air, a combination of shockwave and shaved moon step. The speed was so fast that it even pulled out several after-images in the air. In just a moment, Orgrim's huge palm grasped Marco's head. "Caught you," Orgrim said with a cruel smile. As the words fell, Orgrim slammed Marco towards the ground. The powerful impact made Marco unable to break away from the force and change his body position for a while. And a moment later, a transparent energy halo was seen condensed on Orgrim's arm, falling from the air and chasing after his figure. "Thunderplow hot knife," Orgrim shouted in a low voice. The figure directly broke through the sound barrier, blasted out a sound roar, and directly caught up with Marco's figure. His arm was hung on Marco's neck very accurately. Before Marco could wait, when they took action, their figures both hit the ground. Boom! There was a muffled sound, which seemed to tremble within a few hundred meters. The ground cracked like a turtle shell, and smoke and dust rose up, obscuring everyone's vision. But at this moment, a blue flame spread out instantly, igniting the entire ground and burning countless floating dust. Orgrim's figure was standing in the blue flames, and his domineering energy was constantly looking for something. The moment Marco landed, his body exploded to pieces. Countless flames filled the air, but his breath was gone. Orgrim didn't believe that Marco, who had the title of Phoenix, would die suddenly like this. Just as a blue flame fell from Orgrim's back, Marco's figure suddenly burst out of the green flame like a phoenix rising from the ashes, and kicked him with lightning speed. On Orgrim's shoulders, sharp claws broke through Orgrim's flesh. Then, like an eagle catching a chicken, Marco grabbed Orgrim and flew into the air. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 155. Orgrim grabbed Marco's raptor paw with his backhand, trying to break away from this posture. However, Marco was also a master of the animal system and an esper of the phantom beast species. His own power was very powerful. For a moment, Orgrim was caught in the air, with nowhere to use his strength, and he was unable to break free. A shockwave exploded in his hand, trying to blow off Marco's claws, but for some reason, Marco did not use his ability and managed to withstand the blow. Orgrim saw Marco's blood for the first time. Just when he was about to resist, Marco's figure swayed in the air, and then the force of inertia threw Orgrim away. In this moment of weightlessness, even if Orgrim has moon steps or something, he still needs a moment to adjust. At this moment, Marco's wings suddenly flapped, and his figure accelerated to an extreme, swooping past Orgrim's figure. Then, a splash of blood suddenly appeared from the air, and several blood marks appeared on Orgrim's chest, with bones clearly visible. At the same time, a piece of muscle seemed to be torn off from his left arm. On the other side, blue flames ignited on Marco's foot again, restoring his injuries, but on the other foot, blood was dripping, which was Orgrim's blood. And there was also a piece of flesh hanging on the edge of his sharp mouth that had turned into a phoenix figure. "You damn animals, do you all like to bite people with your mouth?" Orgrim cursed in the air, and Moonstep also adjusted his posture. However, Marco did not have the perverted feeling of rancor, and he spit out Orgrim's flesh and blood casually. "Ha ha ha, when using abilities, there will be an instinctive impulse, right? Maybe this is a side effect of the animal system," Marco laughed in the air. Orgrim didn't care about the injury at all. He moved his arm a little, but it didn't feel serious. With a step on the moon, the figure rushed towards Marco again. Everything in the world has its limits. How many times can your phoenix be resurrected and how many times can you heal your injuries? Orgrim said as he raised his hand and punched Marco. Marco's arms turned into wings and raised up. With a domineering look, he stood directly in front of him. Orgrim's the iron fist hit his wings, and the armed and domineering charge suddenly burst out. But before Marco could wrestle with Orgrim, a shockwave exploded on Orgrim's arm, and directly knocked Marco away. In the past, I might not have been able to do anything with someone as agile and resilient as you, but now, as Orgrim spoke, a cruel smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. In Marco's sight, Orgrim's hands condensed into a powerful shockwave, and this shockwave was quickly compressed in his palms. Just when Marco thought Orgrim was going to hit him with this impact, he found that the guy was pressing the energy of the impact towards his heart. Then, the transparent energy quickly seeped into Orgrim's body. Then, under the influence of this force, Orgrim's heart trembled violently, and then started beating violently, as if it was about to jump out of his chest. The strong beating caused an increase in blood pressure, and a large amount of blood quickly circulated along the blood vessels in the body. Orgrim's skin also feels a little red. Marco seemed to have thought of something. However, before he could say anything, he saw Orgrim's figure speeding up and rushing towards him. The speed was so fast that it seemed to break the air, pulling out several after images in the air. Wild, give me strength, impact, guide my blood, I am the embodiment of destruction, Orgrim shouted lowly. He didn't punch at all, but his strong figure bumped into Marco's body. For a moment, as if the Kingian didn't even react, Marco spat out a mouthful of blood, and then his body was directly knocked out by Orgrim. Orgrim's feet suddenly stepped in the air, as if stopping his body, and the originally stable space cracked with several undetectable dark cracks. The next second, Orgrim's figure crashed into Marco again like a cannonball. Marco raised his arms and green flames emerged, healing his body. At the same time, he wanted to twist his body to avoid the blow. But it was no use, Orgrim's figure had appeared in front of him, and an elbow hit directly on Marco's head. The powerful force directly smashed Marco's nose bone, and another trail of blood spurted out, turning into blue flames in the air. Before Marco could react, Orgrim's fists fell like raindrops, all of them hitting him. The power of impact after impact was revealed from Marco's body, and the blue flames continued to extinguish and burn, falling from the sky like fireworks. This series of rapid and violent blows left Marco unable to fight back, and he could only rely on his Phoenix ability to continue to resist. At the moment when this violent attack came down, a trace of blood suddenly spilled from the corner of Orgrim's mouth. Sure enough, if you are in a bad state, if you force yourself into a violent state in this way, won't it last too long, Orgrim thought in his heart. At the same time, his hands suddenly squeezed together, raised above his head, turned into one body, and hit Marco's head with a fierce blow. The man who had just recovered from the blue flames, his head was instantly exploded by this blow, and Marco's figure was like a cannonball. The blow penetrated and hit the ground. In an instant, a deep pit was made on the ground, and the cracks spread out. And Orgrim also broke away from the manic state just now. But this time, he was not weak or anything, he just felt a little weak. This feeling came and went away quickly. This kind of autonomous rage does not last long. Orgrim's several experiments only lasted about a minute. This time it was even shorter, less than 30 seconds. But the good thing is that with his strong physical fitness, he can completely hold up. I don't know if it's an illusion or something else, but Marco is not as powerful as Orgrim imagined, or maybe he pays too much attention to his own abilities. In terms of physical skills, although the strength is strong enough, it does not show the attack power it should have. Or maybe Marco doesn't have any particularly powerful attack methods. Thinking about it carefully, this guy seems to be a ship doctor by profession. Gee ha 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 ha, Newgate, if your Phoenix only relies on the power of immortality to win the battle, then he will suffer a loss this time, Shiki laughed. Newgate also frowned slightly. How could he not see that almost from the beginning, Orgrim was suppressing Marco in the fight, and the overall rhythm was under Orgrim's control. Marco, although the beating can continue, it seems that it is just for the sake of being beaten. As Marco's father, Newgate also understands that Marco is indeed, as Shiji said, with almost no special attack methods. In previous battles, he relied on immortality and exchanged injuries for wounds come to win the battle. But this method seems to have no effect in front of Orgrim, who is extremely aggressive. He can only be beaten passively. At this moment, the sun, which had already half sunk on the sea, slowly set, and darkness began to cover the sea. An unruly and arrogant smile appeared on the corner of Orgrim's lips, and he laughed very arrogantly. Not enough, Marco, if that's the case, you are no match for me. Even if we continue to fight, the result will be the same. Come on, one more, giving you a 2-on-1 chance. Marco, this guy, had just crawled out of the ground. Hearing these words, his expression was a little ugly, but he had to admit that it seemed to be the case. Newgate also frowned and said angrily, "Huh, arrogant. Gee ha 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 ha, it seems that I have won. Whitebeard, do you want to add another one?" Shiki said with a smile, looking very proud. Newgate is a pirate, and of course he will not really follow the rules. It doesn't matter if Marco can't beat Orgrim, but he just can't stand Orgrim. The bastard is so arrogant. So Newgate snorted, "Jaws, go help Marco." "Yes, Dad, Josie has no psychological burden at all. Pirates, if you can't beat them, just fight in groups. It's so simple. If Orgrim can't survive, you can also call people, they won't stop you." Josie roared angrily. This was a warning to Orgrim, and at the same time, he rushed towards Orgrim. His figure was not worse than Orgrim at all. It could even be said that he looked even better than Orgrim. He must be strong, and his height is not bad. But such a strong figure is not slow at all. In the blink of an eye, he rushed in front of Orgrim. Orgrim also had a smile on his lips and laughed. "That's how happy it is." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his arm, assumed the posture of a thunder plow and a hot knife, and hit Jose. Thunder plow, hot knife. Shining crash. The two strong men collided violently, and Orgrim's chest was pushed by Jose's shoulder. The powerful force and diamond-like hardness made Orgrim spit out a mouthful of blood. Jaws, his neck was completely diamond-shaped and very hard, and he was not injured at all. But Orgrim's equally irresistible force also hung on his neck and directly threw him away. "Drink," Orgrim roared angrily after knocking Josie away with one blow. The power of the night began to steam up in his body. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 156. Orgrim has been studying his power of night before. Through constant exploration, he has improved it to a great extent. He can quickly enhance this power to a certain level in a short period of time. I believe it won't be too long. After a long time, he can directly enter the strongest state. At this time, the night had fallen. After Orgrim knocked Jaws away with one blow, the power of the night was quickly activated. For a moment, I just felt that the power in my body was constantly churning, and my all-round quality was improving. 6 Secrets Return of Life. Orgrim chuckled softly. Under the blessing of the night, his vitality also surged. In just a few moments, the injury healed quickly. When Jaws got up from the ground, Orgrim seemed to have recovered to a complete state. "Ah, this feeling, indeed, the night walks with me," Orgrim exhaled with some satisfaction. As soon as he finished speaking, Marco's figure cut through the darkness of the night and rushed towards him with blue flames. Orgrim's reaction, the speed had increased a lot at this time. The moment Marco started to move, he saw the scene with his peripheral vision. The moment Marco came over, Orgrim raised his hand and grabbed Marco's hand directly. To kick him. "So fast," Marco said in shock. Before he could think about it, Orgrim grabbed Marco's leg, exerted force on his wrist, and smashed him to the ground. At the same time, Jose was also very fast. The moment Orgrim caught Marco, his sturdy figure had already arrived in front of Orgrim. Shine and hit, Jose punched Orgrim in the chest. Orgrim had quick hands and quick eyes. At the same time as Jose's punch came over, he also stretched out his arm and directly grabbed Jose's fist with great accuracy. In an instant, a powerful force came, pushing Orgrim back 2 steps, and his feet sank into the ground. "Impossible," Jose said in surprise. Josie has always been very confident in his own strength, and he does have this kind of confidence. When his strength explodes, he can even throw the warship directly away. One can imagine how powerful he is. But at this time, he struck with all his strength, but was blocked by Orgrim with one hand, and he only took 2 steps back. Gee ha 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 ha, not enough. Orgrim laughed loudly. At the same time, he exerted force with his other hand and directly pulled Marco out from the ground, and smashed Jose's figure. With a fierce blow, Jose and Marco collided, and then both of them rolled out. Before Jose could stand up from the ground, Orgrim's figure had already broken through the night and appeared in front of him, with a huge fist. With a dark-armed domineering look, he punched Jose in the chest. Sparkle Diamond, Jose had no time to resist, so he had to shout lowly. In an instant, his whole body turned into a shining diamond, and his hardness reached an extremely strong level. Orgrim punched him in the chest, and Jose he didn't feel any pain at all, but the huge figure was directly hit and sank into the ground. Pulling up his fist, Orgrim had a ferocious smile on his lips, and then the energy of the impact began to it condensed on the arm, and in an instant, a circular energy wave ring formed on the fist. "This is, Dad," a look of shock flashed in Kiazi's eyes. "Ning Kong wave the roar of the Dragon King," Orgrim shouted in a low voice. As he finished speaking, he punched Jose in the chest again. This time, Jose quickly activated his arm domineering energy and covered his chest with it. Position, the next moment, Orgrim's iron fist slammed on it. The powerful arm domineering force was instantly defeated, and the transparent energy halo directly hit Jose's diamond-shaped chest muscles. An unparalleled impact. The force continued to explode, pressing Jose's figure into the ground bit by bit. It seemed that the power reached a peak. Jose and Orgrim seemed to hear a crisp at the same time, which was the diamond breaking sound. Cough, Jose spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, a powerful shockwave ring erupted from the location of the two people, and Marco, who wanted to come for support, was directly thrown away. The ground suddenly exploded, and a huge pit appeared here instantly. A large number of cracks spread out, destroying everything on the ground. Newgate, who was watching the game with Shiji at this time, was stunned. He clearly saw Orgrim's punch breaking Jose's defense. This was very rare. At least Newgate had never seen the scene in the past few years. He had also sparred with Jose before, and he had to use 7 points of his strength to break Jose's exaggerated defense. Doesn't this scene now prove that Orgrim's blow just now was at least 7 times as powerful as him? Shiji was also a little surprised at this time, although he knew that Orgrim would increase his power during the night. But he really didn't know the exact amount of enhancement. Originally, Orgrim beat Marco, which in Shiji's opinion was already very shameless. After Jaws entered the scene, Shiji felt that Orgrim could fight with the two of them for a while without falling behind. It's already very outstanding. But what is the situation now? Since Jose entered the field, Orgrim has still remained quite strong. 1 versus 2, is it still suppressing the joint efforts of Jose and Marco? This strength cannot be underestimated. Even you have to take it seriously. In the dark night, can his power increase to this extent? Shiji couldn't help but murmur in his heart. Although he was punched into the ground by Orgrim and his defense that he was proud of was broken. But after all, Jaws is also a member of Newgate. A first-rate master. At the moment when Orgrim's power dissipated, he endured the pain in his chest, suddenly exerted force on his arms, supported himself and moved a distance from where he was, and quickly pulled together with Orgrim. He opened the distance. With a smile on his face, Orgrim did not pursue anything. Instead, he raised the soles of his feet and stamped on the ground. A circular shockwave spread out, hitting the fallen objects in the distance. The doom hammer flew up. The warhammer spun several times in the air and landed firmly in Orgrim's hand. If it were said before, it was because he couldn't keep up with Marco with this heavy warhammer. That keen rhythm, but now, Orgrim's strength has grown and there is no need to worry about this. Marco flapped his wings, landed next to Jose, and said with a very serious expression, "Jose, I come and resist his attack. You are responsible for the attack. Let's join forces." If before, Marco felt that it would be a shame to ask Jose to join forces with him to fight Orgrim. He no longer had this idea at this time. He didn't know that Orgrim could strengthen himself in the dark. Strength. Only in the battle at dawn ahead, Orgrim was warming up and did not fully exert his strength, as if to save himself some face. It is obvious that Orgrim is not Marco can handle it alone. I wonder if it is an illusion. When Marco looked at Orgrim at this time, he could even vaguely see that he was as powerful as his father. This is of course an illusion, Orgrim. Although Reem's strength has increased, it has not reached the level of Whitebeard and Golden Lion. But now, he is completely confident to fight with the two top bosses, and even fight until dawn. Jose stretched out his hand and rubbed himself. There are some bruises on the chest, and it seems that the ribs are also cracked a little, but fortunately they are not broken. Clear, Jose responded softly. His eyes were very serious, and he did not dare to underestimate Orgrim. As soon as he finished speaking, Marco fluttered his wings and rushed out. Jose also exerted his strength under his feet. Pounced towards Orgrim. Gee ha 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 ha, Orgrim laughed wildly. The warhammer in his hand danced rapidly, drawing a flower shadow in the air. Transparent energy quickly condensed on the hammer head. The moment Marco came over, Orgrim immediately roared out with the hammer. "Sledgehammer 80. Orgrim shouted in a low voice. The power of the warhammer shattered Marco's body as soon as it hit him. The moment the green flames burned, a powerful shockwave spread out, hitting Marco directly. Co's body exploded. In just a moment and just one blow, Marco's body was completely annihilated by the blow, exploded into a firework, and disappeared in front of Orgrim with blue flames. There may be a reason why Marco did not use domineering power to resist, but it is also enough to show how powerful Orgrim's attack power was at this time. The moment the warhammer destroyed Marco, the figure of Jose, he also rushed in front of Orgrim, his shoulders suddenly dropped, and he hit Orgrim against the shining diamond on his arm. "Shine crash," Jose roared. At this moment, Orgrim also lowered his waist and assumed the same posture as Jose. He lowered his shoulders, covered them with arm domineering, and stepped back with his left foot. He took one step, and then bumped into Kiazi's shoulder. In an instant, the two strong men collided with each other, an armed and domineering confrontation burst out from their shoulders. The same excellent and powerful power, the stalemate together. An abyss opened up on the ground, and the sea in the distance became turbulent, with huge waves spreading out towards the sea one after another. Gee ha 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 ha, Orgrim laughed. Jose's face was extremely serious and calm. Obviously, he was not as calm as Orgrim. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 157. At this moment when Orgrim and Jose were wrestling, Marco's figure burst out of the green flames again. His sharp claws were armed with domineering force, and he kicked Orgrim in the face. As if trying to blind Orgrim's eyes. "It's useless," Orgrim shouted low, and his arm domineering energy covered his head. Facing Marco's paw, he hit it with a headbutt. The arm domineering energy exploded instantly, and Orgrim's headbutt was also very skillful. After all, he often used this move. He went down and directly knocked Marco's paw away. However, during this distraction, Jaws also seized the opportunity and used a sudden force to stagger Orgrim's shoulder. With that shining diamond's arm directly hit Orgrim's chest, and the powerful force instantly lifted Orgrim away. After dancing in the air for several times, Orgrim stepped back 2 steps after landing. Next, the strength was relieved. The ribs on the chest were broken, and blood overflowed from the corners of the mouth involuntarily. Good Orgrim reached out and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and commented with a ferocious smile. Although Orgrim was injured, the expressions of Josie and Marco were not excited, but were extremely serious. The two of them only paused for a moment, and saw that the bruises on Orgrim's chest were quickly fading, and the muscles that had been somewhat deflated were also bulging again. There was no doubt that the injuries were recovering, and even the broken ribs were being repaired. Orgrim swung the warhammer in his hand, and a powerful shockwave covered it, then quickly collapsed and condensed into a beam of light. The sigh of the Dragon King. Orgrim shouted softly. As he finished speaking, the beam of light also flew towards Marco and Jose. The speed of the beam was extremely fast, and Marco and Jose could not dodge, and the two looked at each other. It seems that the communication has been completed. Marco took the lead and stood in front of Jose. The wings of the phoenix were hung with dark-armed domineering colors. With a stagger, two huge wings were protected in front of him. Jose's whole body, they were all turned into diamonds and wrapped in a layer of armed domineering force, and they were pressed against Marco's lower back. The two of them moved forward and backward, preparing to withstand the seemingly powerful blow. On the other side, the moment Shiji saw the light beam appearing, his expression changed. Without saying a word, he dropped the wine bowl in his hand to the ground. With the power of the fluttering fruit, he flew into the air. Newgate, when he saw Shiji's movements, he was a little confused. What are you doing? However, before he could figure it out, a violent impact explosion exploded from a distance, and the dazzling and invisible white light seemed to tear through. It was like a dark night. As the saying goes, the big sound is invisible, and the elephant is invisible. This wave of impact explosion made no one react. The moment the momentum dropped, Newgate saw that the strong shock wave had arrived in front of him. All the drinks and barbecues on the ground were thrown away. Newgate couldn't dodge, and his arm brought a vibrating force, and he swung forward suddenly, and the powerful concussive force and the explosion of shock waves hit him. Together, the space was torn apart. This power came and went quickly. In just a moment, Newgate revoked his shaking power, and in front of him, there was also a mess. Jaw's strong figure was lying on the ground about 20 or 30 meters in front of Newgate. He was in an extremely miserable state, and was in tatters. His mouth, nostrils, ears, and eyes were all covered in blood. If his chest hadn't been still heaving, he looked as if he was dead. As for Marco, he was much better. He crawled out of the blue flames and looked completely unharmed. Should we say that he is worthy of being a phoenix? Although there is no attack method, nothing outstanding, but this invincible vitality can be said to be unparalleled in the world. Jose, Marco quickly rushed to Jose's side, his expression very shocked. This was the first time he had seen Jose suffer such a serious injury. In the past, Jose was proud of his amazing defense. But Marco could also understand this situation, because he had personally experienced the power of the beam just now. Just the moment of contact, his armed domineering energy was blown to pieces. That feeling was an irresistible aura. In an instant, his figure was completely swallowed up, followed by Jose standing behind him. Jose doesn't have the power of Phoenix Nirvana like Marco. It can be said that he ate up 100% of the Dragon King's psi. The whole person was blown away. As the saying goes, if you are sick, I will kill you. Orgrim would not be merciful because of this, and Marco hadn't even had time to say a few words to Jose to confirm his status. Orgrim's sturdy figure had already charged through the night with his warhammer. Drink, the roar of the Dragon King. Orgrim roared angrily. A powerful shockwave condensed on the warhammer in his hand again, and the shockwave instantly turned into a giant dragon. It roared and tried to break free from the warhammer, but it felt like it was tightly imprisoned on it. Marco was shocked. When he looked back, Orgrim's warhammer seemed to be about to fall. At this moment, a big knife with concussive force blocked Marco and Jose's body. Yes, Newgate took action. He could see that Marco might still have the strength to fight, but it was of no use. Jaws had already lost his fighting ability. If he continued to fight, there would be no chance of winning. He didn't want to. Jose was injured again. In an instant, Orgrim's doom hammer collided with Newgate's cloud cut. The force of the impact and the force of shock exploded together, killing both Marco and Jose. Flying away. Newgate's expression became serious at this time. Different from the time when they fought on the sea during the day, Orgrim at this time was already strong enough to challenge himself. Orgrim didn't care. Newgate's intervention, on the contrary, there was excitement in his eyes. That's how it should be. The strongest man in the world. The muscles in Orgrim's arms continued to surge, and the meridians began to swell. Blue veins suddenly appeared. The ground beneath his feet collapsed rapidly, but his eyes were full of fighting spirit. "Drink," Orgrim roared. At this moment, the power of the night climbed directly to its peak, and Orgrim's overall quality was strengthened to twice. A surprise flashed in Newgate's eyes. He did not expect that in this kind of situation, under certain circumstances, Orgrim can still become stronger. A breakthrough to the limit, Newgate thought in his heart. But it's not enough. Although he is strong, it is not enough. Newgate's heart became fierce, and he strengthened his strength in his hands. The shock fruit began to operate again, and the powerful vibration force continued to flow from him. It spread within the body, and the ground beneath his feet also collapsed together. The space began to tremble, was shattered by the force of the impact, and then condensed again. Orgrim exploded with all his strength at this time, and he was in a stalemate with Newgate. Right there when Orgrim's momentum reached its peak, the ground suddenly cracked, and a bottomless crack spread quickly between him and Newgate. Then, the island where the two were on was directly destroyed by it. It split into two and tilted up. At the same time, the sea surface was also torn apart, and the slightly dark clouds in the sky also surged into a huge swirling nest. There was a soft click, and the space in contact between the doom hammer and Kongyunki was completely unable to withstand the force of shock and impact, and completely collapsed. Then Orgrim could no longer resist the force. He took several steps back and discharged all the concussive force from the war hammer. At the same time, he couldn't help spitting out a mouthful of blood. At this time, he only felt that his internal organs were shaken to pieces. His arms went limp, and the war hammer fell to the ground. He was unable to lift it up, and he leaned on the handle of the war hammer. Newgate also took 2 steps back at this time, with a faint trace of blood flowing out of the corner of his mouth, frowning, looking at Orgrim, with an inexplicable look in his eyes. The manic space gradually calmed down, the catharsis of energy also dissipated, the sea began to return to calm, and the swirling nests of dark clouds in the sky gradually disappeared. Stability has also returned to the island. A ruthless look flashed in Newgate's eyes, and the trembling power in his hand flickered slightly. Just when he was about to kill Orgrim completely, Shishi's figure fell from the sky and stood in front of Orgrim. Around. Shiji's expression was serious at this time, his eyes fixed on Newgate, and gravels rose and fell from time to time under his feet. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and the atmosphere fell silent. Shiji knew that Newgate had murderous intentions. Generally speaking, Newgate was not so intolerant, but maybe it was the tragic situation between Josie and Marco that angered him, right? Coupled with Orgrim's powerful strength, it really shocked Newgate. In time, as long as this guy doesn't die, he will definitely become a top master, one who can be on an equal footing with himself. That's why Newgate became murderous. As for Shiji, he is protecting Orgrim at this time. As long as you, Newgate, dare to take action, don't blame me for not talking about our old friendship. Newgate looked at Shiji, and then at Orgrim, and then the anger in his heart gradually dissipated, and the murderous intent in his eyes slowly disappeared. It was just a surge of anger. He, Newgate, is not the kind of guy who can't see others having a future. That's it, Newgate said in a deep voice. A slight smile appeared on Shiji's lips and said it's the best. The concessions of the two bosses also eased the tense atmosphere. Newgate waved, and his sons took Marco and Josie aboard the ship. Then Newgate looked at Ogre Mew, glanced at him and said, "Boy, I'm waiting for you." This is a kind of recognition. Newgate knows very well that sooner or later, Orgrim will come to challenge him. At that time, the current boy will become one of the heroes on the sea. After hearing Newgate's words, Orgrim also had a smile on his lips and said, "It won't be long." Newgate snorted coldly and had no intention of talking nonsense to Shiji. He turned around and walked towards his Moby Dick. Shiji didn't stop anything, but he was in a good mood at this time. If he didn't feel it would be better not to irritate Newgate here, he even wanted to laugh. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 158. Shiki's boat. At this time Orgrim was wrapped in bandages, like a mummy. "Just leave the mouth, eyes, and nostrils outside," he said unhappily. "Nightingale, you bastard, did you do this on purpose? How could I have any external injuries? Is it an internal injury? Why did you give me so many bandages?" Nightingale slapped the bandages on after tying the knot. He said with a smile, "You don't know how badly you were injured, right? Almost all of your internal organ functions have been lost. Normally, you should have died long ago. Thanks to your strength vitality support. Yes, it's an internal problem. If you don't find a way to cure it quickly, why are you wearing bandages all over your body?" Orgrim couldn't help but curse. When he said these words, blood also overflowed from the corners of his mouth, staining all the bandages on his chin red. "I'm sorry, but I can't do anything about your internal injuries. I can't save you. I can only tie you up with a bandage," Nightingale said with a smile. Just kidding, Nightingale was a great doctor, but as the saying goes, medicine can't cure diseases, but it can save destined people with your injuries. Normally, you would have died a long time ago. There is no need for treatment, and there is no way to start, okay? So Nightingale's idea is to tie Orgrim directly and ask him not to move. After all, if he moves now, the severity of the injury will increase. Sex. This is his treatment method. Anyway, I have no way to do it. I just tie up Orgrim and let him heal on his own. What do you mean? Say goodbye to Sanlian. Orgrim couldn't help but cursed again. What's this? I'm sorry, there's no way to save him. Should I just wait to die? If I put it on him, I'm sorry. It can't be cured. He can heal on his own, right? I can't find the pleasure of being a doctor in you at all. If you have any problem in the future, just ask someone to tie you up with a bandage. There is no need to call me." Nightingale waved her hand and complained. To be honest, with Orgrim's physique, he doesn't need to treat minor problems at all. The wounds may have healed before they were disinfected. As for major problems, they need to be treated at all. No, if you put it on others, it will be a situation where you are waiting for death, and Nightingale has no place to start. Therefore, there is no sense of accomplishment. How about treating a chicken? Just tie it up and heal yourself. You bastard has no medical ethics. How dare you say that you are a doctor? Orgrim said, very unhappy after hearing this. Shut up. The more you talk, the more serious the injury will be. Besides, before being a doctor, I was a pirate first. This is what you taught me. How about it? Am I looking more and more like a pirate ship doctor now? Nightingale joked with a smile. As she spoke, Nightingale picked up a cup from the table and took 2 sips. Orgrim was stunned for a moment and asked, "What is that?" "Oolong tea?" Nightingale smiled and said. Damn it, you're drinking while you're treating me? Do you have any qualities as a doctor? Haven't you given up drinking? Orgrim cursed again. I told you it was oolong tea, okay. Nightingale cursed angrily. I can smell the alcohol, Orgrim also roared. The bandage on his chin became increasingly red. You must have made a mistake. I just mixed some water of life in it. It's definitely not alcohol, it's oolong tea, Nightingale said without letting go. Are you really interested in lying to yourself? Orgrim complained mercilessly. Just as he and Nightingale were scolding each other, the door of the medical room was also pushed open, and then Shiji, Beckman, Neiman, and Sphinx Si, Katerina Depen and even Rengar all walked in together. Everyone laughed when they saw Orgrim being wrapped into a rice dumpling by Nightingale. When you fought with Whitebeard, you were so brave. I thought you were already as strong as him. But then I turned around and you became seriously injured, Beckman joked with a smile. Brother, where is the immortality you promised? Neiman also asked with a smile. If you listen to Nightingale, you will know that I am indeed immortal, okay. Orgrim couldn't help but say. Nightingale nodded and said with great approval, yes, under normal circumstances, with his injury, anyone would be dead. But he didn't die. So awesome, Mr. Chewy, you really opened my eyes today, that's Whitebeard. The Sphinx looked at Orgrim with an expression of admiration and exclaimed. Katerina Depen also smiled and said I also wanted to challenge him before, but I didn't have so many. Courage, my eyes were open today. Gee ha 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 ha, yes, Orgrim, you gave me a big surprise. Shiki said with a smile. He was in an extremely happy mood now. This guy Orgrim is so brilliant. He defeated 2 of Newgate's capable men in one breath, and he was not at a disadvantage at all. The feeling. He was even able to fight Newgate forcefully and the stalemate lasted for a while. Even though Orgrim was seriously injured now, Shiji also saw the blood on the corner of Newgate's mouth. At that time, I couldn't help but want to fight Newgate. After all, it was rare for Newgate to be injured. Shiji was in full condition at the time. In a fight between big guys at their level, even the slightest difference could be a big deal. Infinite expansion. In other words, at that time, Shiji saw the possibility of defeating Newgate. But because Orgrim was seriously injured, he finally gave up this idea. From then on, it can be seen how important Orgrim is in Shiji's heart. He can temporarily give up the chance to win against Newgate for Orgrim. Alas, there is nothing to brag about. In the end, am I the loser? Orgrim shook his head with regret and said. No, Lord Orgrim, you first fought with Whitebeard and were injured, then defeated the combination of Phoenix Marco and Diamond Jaws, the 2 masters, and finally faced Whitebeard again. In this case, even if you lose, you still deserve a compliment. Anyway, I admire you very much. Rengar suddenly spoke very seriously. Orgrim was stunned for a moment, and then said with a smile on his lips, gee ha 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 ha, do you deserve to be me? Give you some sunshine and you will be brilliant, Beckman joked with a smile. But I have to say that Orgrim's performance this time is really amazing. Now his strength can be respected everywhere. It is also enough for him on the sea. Galloping. Boss Shiji, how do I compare to Kaido and Charlotte Lingling? Orgrim raised his eyebrows and asked. Shiji was silent for a moment after hearing this. After thinking for a while, he shook his head and said, it's still a little short of that, but it's not far away. Then without waiting for Orgrim to speak, Shiji said again, Orgrim, Kaido, Charlotte Lingling, the reason why they are second-rate is not because of their lack of strength, but because there are many others. As reason in terms of strength, they are not much worse than me, Newgate, and Roger. Orgrim has never met Charlotte Lingling, nor has he fought against Kaido. Before that, he only understood that Kaido and Charlotte Lingling were on the sea, with Shiji, Whitebeard, Roger is down a notch. As for the factors involved, he doesn't understand it. Before, he only thought it was a matter of strength. But now that Shiji said it, it doesn't seem to be the case. After all, should he be worthy of being the same person who served under rocks back then? But don't be discouraged. Your boy's future is no worse than theirs. There will eventually be a place for you in this ocean. Even now, your strength is enough for you to roam the world, Shiji said with a smile again. This is not Shiji comforting Orgrim, but he really thinks so. With Orgrim's current strength, even if he meets the Admiral, he can fight with him. Even if you can't win a battle, you can still run away, and it's very easy. Having said that, I feel a little complacent. Orgrim smiled and said. After a slight pause, Orgrim said softly, but I still have many shortcomings. This battle has a lot of benefits for me. After I go back, I need to take a good retreat to digest this. After finishing speaking, Orgrim smacked his lips with some regret and said, it's a pity that I am so brilliant this time, but I can't spread my glory. Shiji was stunned for a moment after hearing this, then smiled and said, that's not necessarily the case. At the same time, in the sky not too far from the sea, on a hot air balloon airship, the bird Morgan's people are also extremely excited. He held many photos in his hand. If you look closely at these photos, you can see that they were taken when Orgrim fought against Marco, Jose, Whitebeard, and others. It was a coincidence that Morgans, the Birdman, happened to be near the sea area before. When Orgrim and Newgate fought for the first time, the color of the world changed and a tsunami swept across. Morgans, a bright-minded guy, immediately thought of something. This was the territory of the Whitebeard pirates. If this happened, there was a high probability that Newgate was fighting someone. Relying on the ability of his birdfruit albatross form, Morgans quickly flew over there to look for news elements. As a result, the next communication between the flying pirates and the Whitebeard pirates was discovered. When Shiji was hiding from Orgrim's Dragon King's side, he flew into the sky and discovered this birdman. After all, when everyone has nothing to do, they don't act domineering at all times. Isn't there something wrong with that? After being discovered by Shiji, Morgans was also shocked, only to find that Shiji had no intention of stopping him or stopping him. Shiji's mentality at the time was that I had taken advantage and was the winner. You, the news of the world, can publish it if you want. I won't suffer any loss, and I can just promote my reputation as the Golden Lion. Therefore, this discussion and exchange that should not have been exposed ended up in the newspapers. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 159. At Marine Headquarters Marineford, the matter regarding the King's Shishibukai proposal has almost come to an end. The senior generals of the Navy discussed a charter. And they have also developed many ways to hinder this plan. Now we are waiting for the Shishibukai plan to be implemented at the World Conference, and then their navy will start to hate the world government and so on. The weather is very good today. The Warring States General is sitting in his office, drinking tea leisurely. Looking out the window at the busy navy in the Square of Justice, he was in a happy mood. It can be said that I haven't been this happy for a long time. There has been no big movement on the sea recently, and the affairs of the King's Shishibukai have been arranged. There is no official business to deal with, and there are not many thorns like Orgrim emerging. Over the past year, the rectification of military affairs and discipline in Bihai has also achieved certain results. The headquarters even collected tens of billions of stolen money and cleaned up a large number of corrupt naval bases. Next, this campaign to eliminate corruption will gradually be carried out in other sea areas. In short, there is a feeling of prosperity. How could this not make the Warring States General feel happy? Today is such a good day, The Warring States General held the teacup, looked out the window, and murmured with some emotion. But as soon as he finished speaking, there was a knock on the office door. The Warring States General curled up his lips, put on a smile, and said, "Come in." Then a naval lieutenant commander walked in before he could speak. The Warring States General asked, "Has the lamb I bought been delivered?" "Yes, the Warring States General asked someone to buy a strange little lamb not long ago. The guy likes to eat paper. The Warring States General thinks this guy is completely can be used to destroy some confidential documents. And he looks very interesting and can express his personality very well, making him, a naval general, not so rigid. So I ask someone to buy it and prepare to send it to the headquarters. Counting the time, it should be today, right?" It was indeed a good day. As soon as he finished speaking, the Navy lieutenant commander was a little confused. "What little lamb? I haven't heard of it. I'm not responsible for this either. Does the Warring States General want to eat barbecue?" "Ahem, General, the mutton you requested hasn't been delivered yet. Can I ask someone to go to the kitchen to hurry you up?" the Marine Major thought for a while and asked. The Warring States General was stunned for a moment, and then his expression changed. "What do you mean? Did you kill the sheep? Don't you want to have barbecue?" the Navy Lieutenant Commander asked with some surprise. "What barbecue? That's a useful sheep I bought, don't kill it," the Warring States General said quickly. "Ah, I've never heard of this, and I'm not responsible for buying sheep. This may be a misunderstanding," the Marine Lieutenant Commander quickly explained. The Warring States General breathed a sigh of relief. "If the sheep I bought for 200,000 Baileys turned into a barbecue, it would be such a sin." "What is that?" the Warring States General took a breath and asked. "Ah, that's it? You, General of the Warring States period, ordered the Intelligence Department to report any news about Kazgarot Orgrim to you first. This is an urgent special issue of the News of the World today, and it contains information about the lion. News from disciple Hasgarot Orgrim," the Navy Lieutenant Commander responded quickly. The Warring States General's expression changed and he looked a little surprised. "It's been almost a year, right? There is no news about this guy. Occasionally, I heard that he went out with Shiji to fight some pirates, but those were all trivial matters. It must be a big event to be in the newspaper this time." The thought of the bastard Orgrim not showing up for a year made Sengoku feel a little lonely. He calmed down a little and didn't pay too much attention. After all, news and newspapers are one thing, and information from the Ministry of Intelligence is another thing. Big news that can appear in newspapers may not necessarily be a big event that can affect the Navy. When one of Kaido's little brothers broke the news to the News of the World about Kaido crying for Orgrim, wasn't it also published in the News of the World? It's just a piece of tidbits that people on the sea made fun of. "Bring it to me and see." The Warring States General stretched out his hand and nodded. Soon, he began to read the newspaper. The photo that caught his eye made the Warring States General's expression become even more surprised. Because in this photo, it was not just Kazgarot Orgrim and Edward Newgate. What's happening here? Shiki is at war with Newgate? Why didn't I receive the message? What happened to the Navy? The Warring States General was shocked and read it carefully. Then he breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out to be a small friction. This is normal. This kind of thing often happens on the sea. After reading it carefully, the Warring States General's face became a little gloomy, and his original happy mood dissipated in an instant. This Orgrim, in just 1 year, has it become this strong? The Warring States General sighed in his heart. With 1 against 2, he violently defeated Whitebeard's Phoenix Marco and Diamond Jose. This strength is enough to run rampant all over the world. And this guy actually fought with Nyogai. Te briefly fought twice, each time stronger than the last. Perhaps he broke through his own limits in this battle? Then, the Warring States General thought of Kuzan, Jun, and Sakazuki. These three guys, now Kuzin has been restored to the rank of Major General, Sakaski is still a Lieutenant General, and Jun is also a Lieutenant General. If Kuzin hadn't been punished by the Tianlong people back then, he would probably be a Lieutenant General now, right? The three of them have been. It also grew very quickly, and wiped out many evil parties wandering on the sea. The Warring States General was very pleased before. But compared with Orgrim, it seems to be far behind. At least in the Warring States General's opinion, except for Sakaski may have the strength to challenge Whitebeard, but Kuzin and Jun are not qualified. And Sakaski, I'm afraid he doesn't have the strength to defeat Diamond Josie and Phoenix Marco 1 against 2, right? At least not now. It would be nice to have the upper hand. Not to mention that he can continue to challenge Whitebeard after this. Although he felt a little emotional and became more wary of Orgrim's strength, Warring States knew very well that he could not come up with any plan to stop this situation. After all, this bastard Orgrim is such a good nerd that he stayed under Shiji's banner for more than a year without showing up. Even if the Navy wants to do something against him, there is no chance. Shaking his head, the Warring States General put the newspaper on the table without saying anything. Orgrim's strength has increased, but it has not caused any waves for the time being. Even the name of the Golden Lion has become more famous. I guess many people are thinking about becoming a disciple, right? After all, within 1 year, Shiji had trained such an awesome guy, he was simply a famous teacher. But Warring States has nothing to worry about. Those guys may only be able to see Shiji's famous teacher aura but not how talented Orgrim himself is. There is a factor of Shiji in this, but it is definitely not the decisive factor. Even if a talent like Orgrim is placed in the Navy, it can still be cultivated no worse than Shiji's men. Those people who want to learn from Shiji must also see whether Shiji can like them. Just when the Warring States General wanted to change his mood and not be affected by Orgrim, another naval colonel walked in. Warring States General, there is news about the Roger pirates, the naval colonel said quickly. The Sengoku admiral's expression changed and he became serious. If the fact that Orgrim was published in the newspaper did not have much impact, the whereabouts of this bastard Roger will have a great impact on the Navy and the world government. It is quite heavy. On the one hand, it is because Roger is a big pirate and is currently in the limelight. On the other hand, it is because the Navy and the world government discovered that the Roger pirates are studying the historical text. Adding up these factors, Roger's threat level has exceeded the expectations. Where are they? The Warring States General asked in a deep voice. According to reliable information and eyewitness information, the Roger pirates have left the New World again and appeared near the waters of Changhuan Island with an unknown target. The Navy captain responded quickly. Long roundabout, the Warring States General was stunned for a moment. The target is unknown, that means I don't know what they were doing there. Strange. Why does this guy always run away from the New World? Going back and forth, in and out of the Grand Line? Is there something wrong? The Warring States General stretched out his hand to spread a chart on the table, and quickly found the geographical location of Changhuan Island in it. Comparing the left and right, the front and back are the capital of Seven Waters and Gaia Island respectively. The capital of Seven Waters, the Warring States General murmured softly. He directly excluded Gaia Island. After all, Gaia Island has nothing to say, it is just a pirate paradise. It was tortured by Orgrim not long ago. Even after recovering, the Navy would occasionally go there to sweep up, nothing special. But as for the capital of Seven Waters, Roger's ship was built there, and last year, they stayed in the capital of Seven Waters for a while, not knowing what they were doing. Maybe there is some secret hidden in the capital of Seven Waters. Aren't there rumors that the drawings of the ancient weapon Pluto are circulating in the capital of Seven Waters? Thinking about it again, the Roger pirates always study historical texts. The Warring States General felt that he had grasped some information. Could it be that, are the Roger pirates looking for ancient weapons? Thinking of this, the warring states general's expression changed, and he said in a deep voice quickly, "Notify Garp and ask him to take people to the capital of Seven Waters as quickly as possible, where the Roger pirates are likely to land." It's just that the warring states general was really smart this time but was misled by his cleverness. He led himself astray. Roger didn't go to the capital of Seven Waters at all. His destination was Gaia Island. Thank you guys for the reward. I have started to add more in accordance with the rules. There are a lot of flowers today. I will add more flowers later. Give me your monthly ticket too. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 160. Just when Garp was tricked by the warring states period into running towards the capital of Seven Waters. The Roger pirates have landed on Gaia Island. At this time, Roger was holding a newspaper in his hand, which contained news about the battle between Orgrim and Newgate. He said with some emotion, "Did you see it? In just over a year, Orgrim has grown to this point. When we met in the capital of Seven Waters, that guy was still being chased by the Navy. Now he has turned around and dared to challenge Whitebeard." Sparky Jabba said with a smile. "The more I think about it, the more I regret it. I should have invited him to our ship in the first place." Roger couldn't help but smacked his lips and said, "Ha ha ha ha, don't be so hypocritical. It was obviously you who invited him and he refused." "Okay," Jabba laughed and joked. "Humph, I didn't seriously invite him, otherwise he wouldn't refuse. No one in this world knows invitations better than me, and no one can refuse my invitation," Roger said very stinkingly. Yes, yes, you know everything, you are the king of understanding." Jabba waved his hands, not bothering to argue with Roger about this. "Isn't that right? Do you think my listening to the sounds of all things is a joke?" "I heard Orgrim's heartbeat at the beginning," Roger said still very rudely. Just as the two of them were talking nonsense, Rayleigh and Kojaki Odin came over together. "What's the topic?" Riley asked with a smile. "What else could it be?" Roger was regretting that he didn't invite Orgrim to the ship. Jabba joked. "Oh? Wasn't it rejected?" Rayleigh exposed Roger's face mercilessly. "You guy, don't say that next time." Roger cursed angrily. Everyone laughed. After laughing, Roger asked, "How was it? Have you found out the news about the soaring sea currents?" If there is anything the warring states general guessed right, it is that Roger and others did come here for the historical text this time. They have studied a lot in the New World, and with the addition of Kojaki Odin, they can quickly decipher the history. The news in the text. Therefore, the Roger pirates also knew a lot of secrets. Judging from some information, there was originally a very important historical text on Gaia Island, which should have recorded some important information, but later, the historical text of Gaia Island was lost, and the news could no longer be found. When they were in the New World, the Roger pirates focused on investigating this information. Then they made a bold guess, that is a joke that has been circulating at sea. Wenbrand Rolando. More than 400 years ago, he was an explorer and botanist in the North Sea. According to legend, he found the legendary land of gold on Gaia Island, and brought the news back to his hometown. The king asked him to take the large fleet to find the land of gold, but when he returned to Gaia Island again, everything had disappeared. Rolando also angered the king. Was sentenced by the king to the crime of deceiving the king and executed. As a result, his reputation plummeted and he became the great liar Wenbrand Rolando. In the past 400 years, there have been jokes about him spread on the sea. But there are also many people who are willing to believe in the existence of the land of gold. Countless explorers and treasure hunters are looking for this treasure on the sea. And the news Roger received is that the lost historical text, it is very likely that they are also in the land of gold. Hundreds of years ago, the Sandians, a fighting nation that became famous on the sea, seemed to be the guardians of this historical text. This fighting nation has also followed them on the sea. The historical text disappeared together. After various inferences, the Roger pirates and others discovered a secret, which is the sky-high current of Gaia Island. There is also the legend of Sky Island. In the New World, many big guys know about Sky Island. I have been there, Roger has not been there yet, but through some information Shiji revealed before, he knows very well that there are two strange sea areas above the sky. The White Sea and the White Sea, and on the White Sea, there is so the Golden Land, and historical text on Gaia Island were carried to the Sky Island by the soaring sea currents. As soon as this idea appeared, Roger could no longer restrain his curiosity. Rushed out of the New World again in one breath, preparing to take the soaring sea current from Gaia Island to the empty island to find a historical text. As for the land of gold and so on, if you find it, just grab some. He is about to die, what kind of wealth does he need? Rayleigh and the others are not very interested in this kind of treasure. They are mainly interested in historical texts, which is what they have been pursuing. Speaking of which, Roger probably wasn't bragging when he was executed later. He may not have left any treasure in the sense of wealth on Ravdrua, but there must be news about the land of gold. Therefore, according to his way of thinking, as long as you find Ravdrua, you can indeed gain immeasurable wealth, power, fame, and status. After all, I have left all the information about ancient weapons and the land of gold on it. If I get these, I will have enough fame and status. It is not impossible to even conquer the world. Isn't this everything in the world? Roger has now found 3 historical text pieces of road signs. One is a rubbing of the historical text stolen from Charlotte Lingling, which has been deciphered by Kojiki Odin. The other one was in the hands of Odin. They and Wano country did have a road sign historical text, which later went to Kaido. The last one was found not long ago from the back of Uzo, the elephant owner. Therefore, Roger is now short of the last landmark historical text, but there is no news now. He has reason to suspect that this historical text is on the empty island. That's why he hurried over here in a hurry. As long as he finds this thing, he can go to Lavdru. Unfortunately, Orgrim knew very well that there was indeed a historical text on the Sky Island, but it was not a historical text with the road sign, but a historical text that recorded the secrets of Sea King Poseidon. But after all, it was possible, and Roger's journey was not in vain. After hearing Roger's words, Riley smiled, nodded and said, "Let's find out clearly, we are lucky this time. The current surges into the sky only once a year, and this year's one hasn't come yet, otherwise our trip would have been in vain. In 2 months, the sky-high sea currents will appear, and we need to prepare now. Then we can use this thing to go to the empty island." After hearing this, Jabba smacked his lips with some regret. He opened his mouth and said it would have been better if we hadn't fallen out with Shiji in the first place. We didn't have to choose this dangerous way to get to the empty island. We could just ask him to help us get there. Not to mention, according to the goddess licking dog relationship between Shiji and Roger at that time, Shiji might actually help Roger once, hoping that Roger would owe him a favor or something. But it's impossible now. Is it possible to reach the top of the western sky in the New World and reach the Sky Island? Didn't they pass by Newgate? Riley raised his eyebrows and said. The top of the western heaven is too time-consuming. It may take a year or 2 to get there, and it is also very dangerous. We don't have so much time, so let's leave from the soaring sea of Gaia Island, Roger said in a deep voice. A smile appeared on Kojiki Odin's lips, and he said either all of us board the Sky Island, or all of us die together without a burial place. Is this how pirates behave? Love it, love it. Ha 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 ha, no one knows the soaring ocean currents better than me. Don't worry, we will definitely be able to get up there, Roger said with a smile. Where did you get your confidence? Rayleigh mocked with a smile. But he didn't object to anything. He was also very curious and looking forward to the soaring sea currents. It must be said that the members of the Roger Pirates are basically adventurous people except Bucky, This guy is already praying that the soaring sea currents won't appear. Okay, now we have to think of a way to add wings to our ship. Should we go to the capital of Seven Waters to invite Master Tom? Anyway, there are still 2 months left, so it should be enough time, Riley asked, raising his eyebrows. No, we already caused a lot of trouble for Tom last time. With our identities, it's best not to get involved with them, and, the most important thing is to avoid the Navy. The Seven Waters City is the Navy's warship factory, and it is too easy to be exposed there. Roger shook his head and said. There are also good boat builders on Gaia Island. It seems that there are often people who challenge the soaring sea currents. In this regard, perhaps their experience and skills are better. After Jabba thought for a while, he suggested. Just find someone from Gaia Island to help. Roger thought for a moment and nodded. On an empty island in the New World, Kaido was holding a newspaper in his hand and looking at the news about Orgrim and Newgate. Kaido is so heartbroken that he can't help himself. Orgrim, if you had joined my ship, now, if we joined forces, we would have killed that old guy in Newgate. Kaido wailed in pain. Then his eyes filled with tears and he cursed Shiji, you bastard, one day I want you to look good. As soon as he finished speaking, Kaido jumped hard and flew directly from the Sky Island 10,000 meters above the ground. There was a free fall. I can't live in a world without Orgrim, Kaido yelled in the air. His figure fell rapidly and committed suicide.